So this is week 116 or around that of our discussions, and we're looking at new cause areas within EA today. And whoops, somehow I jumped to the end. So real quick, EA is an idea to maximize the good you can do through your career, your projects, and donations, using evidence and reason to do that. It's also a movement or a community of a lot of individuals and organizations who care about this idea and gather around it. We're talking here on the Christian EA call. And EA traditionally has 4 causes. So I have these represented by different images. Here we have global health and poverty. I think this is an education and literacy training program here. The second cause that EA has traditionally been concerned about is animal welfare, or just improving how we treat animals, especially domesticated animals and animals that suffer on factory farms. The third area is promoting the long-term future, or hedging against potential existentially catastrophic risks, things like nuclear weapons proliferating, or bio risks from emergent pandemics that could be much, much worse than COVID even, and many others. And then finally, community building. This is a bit more meta. This is just, I suppose, if you think that these causes are important, well, then it's also important to tell people about important causes. And the EA movement has been sort of justifying its existence on that basis. And I suppose there are other sorts of meta movements that we might think are valuable, even adjacent to or outside of the EA movement. So why do effective altruists consider these 4 causes? I think part of it is just that's what's stuck. 4 causes have stuck. Also, these 4 causes rank very highly on this traditional heuristic called ITN, or sometimes called scalability, tractability, neglectedness framework. This is not like a perfect scientific optimization tool. This is a heuristic to better take entire cause areas, or like areas of focus for altruistic endeavors, whether that's applying our career to something or donating to something, and unpacking that on a few different dimensions to give us a good idea of whether it's a good thing to work on. What is a good thing to work on? Well, a good thing to work on is maybe something where you would have a big impact in terms of what you care about, in a way that is counterfactual or counterfactually significant, in a way that makes a difference that otherwise wouldn't happen if you didn't get involved. And so EA looks at broad causes like animal welfare or global health and poverty, and they address it on scale. How big is this problem? For instance, with global health and poverty, how many people are suffering from poor health? How many people are living under $2 a day? The second way effective altruists look at a cause is they look at tractability or solvability. Can we, by tackling this issue, actually move the needle? I like that we have a little needle here in this image. Can we, by donating to charities in this space, actually create a measurable difference, right? And then finally, neglectedness. Is this an area that has been traditionally underfunded or overlooked relative to its scale and how easy it is to solve it? So EA came up with those 4 traditional cause areas. But it sort of begs the question: why 4? Why not more? Why not more cause areas in EA? It is a big tent. You could be like in the effective altruism movement and care about something that's not in one of these 4 cause areas. And I think that is in fact true for many people. So Open Philanthropy, one of the largest effective altruist adjacent foundations, actually did something called a cause prioritization prize, where they commissioned something like $120,000 in funding for people who could design their own, or basically make a pitch for a certain cause that wasn't one of these traditional 4, or maybe fell much further within one of those 4, but didn't receive as much light of day. And I want to jump through a few of these and address a couple that did well in this cause prioritization prize, and then maybe suggest a few more that Christians might be especially interested in, and kind of open it up to see what you think. What are maybe some new cause areas that EA should consider? The first I want to talk about is actually what won the Open Philanthropy cause prioritization exercise, which was arguing against the use of organophosphate pesticides and other neurotoxicants. So that's a mouthful. I'm not a chemistry person, so I'll probably misspeak about some of these things. My Latin also isn't very good, and these tend to be very Latin-ish words. But farmers around the world have used pesticides for a long time to improve the yields of crops. Some of those pesticides are really harmful to human health, and organophosphates are apparently really harmful for human health. In terms of importance, this is a really important problem. In the post that was put about this, they estimated, some researchers estimated that between 2001 and 2016, organophosphates were responsible for the loss of something like over 26 million IQ points. I don't really know what that means over a population. I guess, what is that, like 300 million people in the US, about 30 million IQ points. This is like 0.1 IQ for every single person in the US lost just because of organophosphate pesticides. Anyways, there's massive harm from this. It actually, I mean, a lot of pesticides cause neurological damage when they're left on the crops and people eat those crops. And that's sort of the causal chain. This is a problem in the US, but it's also a problem in lower middle income countries. And it's estimated that lifetime earnings from this have been a loss of something like 50, some estimates put it up to like $100 or $200 billion a year, a really massive amount. It seems like a really neglected issue. So the Lancet Commission, according to them, I think they're a medical commission that looks at issues like this. They say that there's really been a weak global response. But there have been in the past really tractable, really solvable ways to address this. Gibwell has looked at reducing pesticides for related issues with neurological diseases. I believe some pesticides cause people to have increased rates of depression and suicidal thoughts. I think that's actually related to the farming suicide epidemic in India. And Gibwell estimates that there's something like a 30 to 60% likelihood of passing certain regulation in several Asian countries for suicide prevention reasons. So it's already been done in the past as well, I believe. So maybe we could do more of this in the future to improve IQ and just mental ability. The second cause that actually scored pretty well in this cause prioritization prize was violence against women and girls. Violence against women and girls. And this is, of course, a massive issue. So there are lots of different estimates on this. The one that's cited in the EA forum profile on this is that something like 1 in every 3 girls aged 15 or older have experienced either physical or sexual intimate partner violence. So their partner is abusing them, or non-partner sexual violence. And this is just a massive amount of people undergoing a lot of suffering that manifests itself in many different forms of physical symptoms, psychological symptoms. It's really not how God intended for people to treat each other or for people to treat women. It's arguably neglected. So the most major funds of this kind is the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women, and they dedicate somewhere around 10 million, in the tens of millions yearly, I believe low tens of millions every year to address this. And this is distinct from providing birth control or contraception to women. It does seem like there are ways to reduce violence against women, especially by promoting support groups and activism groups on a decentralized basis, encouraging women to talk about the violence that they're experiencing and to seek help and to support each other through that. That has been shown through some RCTs to be really promising. The EA forum post puts cost effectiveness estimates at somewhere between like $50 and $200 for every disability adjusted life year that's improved through this way. So that's another really interesting cause that maybe EA should be concerned about. And does this fit under global health and poverty? Maybe, but maybe not. This sounds more like a matter of human rights, and this is a very particular human rights issue that we can tractably tackle. A third area I want to mention is this idea of prenatal health, and this is less mainstream EA. This wasn't talked about there was actually an EA forum post about this, but this is the idea of helping unborn babies who have not come to term to not die through a miscarriage. If we look at, again, the importance, tractability, and neglectedness of this, it's plausibly promising, but it's much harder to tell. So a miscarriage is defined as the loss of a pregnancy at less than 20 weeks of gestation. And one NIH paper showed that something like 60, they estimated that something like 60 or 26% or a quarter of all pregnancies in the US end in miscarriage. This is roughly in the low millions of people every year. If you consider, if you call this persons, and this is quite a lot of loss. And I think exactly how important you view this issue, it depends on how much you value the life of an unborn child at this stage of life. And of course, people have various views about that, but it seems like at least something that many Christians should be talking a lot more about. I've never really heard Christians talk about this issue in particular. Usually this is sort of a sideline issue or forgotten issue in the broader cultural war debate about abortion. So I'm curious what you all think about this. There is this interesting article I came across from Brian Kaplan, who's an economist who I think himself is a pro-life utilitarian. And he makes this comment: where are all the pro-life utilitarians? Where are all the utilitarians who are really focused on improving prenatal care? And I think he's also addressing the abortion issue in particular, which I wasn't trying to get into specifically with prenatal health, but I think you could ask a similar question: where are the efforts to improve prenatal health and reduce miscarriages? This doesn't seem to be like clearly tractable. I did some quick Google searching, and there was a large Cochrane study which showed that vitamin supplementation, which many people thought was really important to preventing miscarriages, doesn't seem to hold up in some studies that they did. There wasn't like a huge difference between those who received the vitamins and those who didn't in terms of miscarriage rates. So, but anyways, maybe given the importance of this issue for many people, that even with less tractability, this should still be a really important cause area to address. So there are many others. There are many other new causes that we could talk about. I'd love to hear what you think. Some others that just came to mind from some quick thinking. One is this idea of promoting development and promoting economic growth, especially in the most poor off areas. And one way we've thought about this in the past is by like outside experts and outside consultants from the World Bank and from other global development bodies coming in to low-income countries and advising those governments on what to do, what policies to make to encourage growth. But this is a bit infeasible in many ways, and maybe not always the best way to both understand the immediate cultural needs and in context, and also some of the cultural implications of or aspects of policy change. So one idea that I read in an EA forum post was this idea of supporting future African economists, and if EA could like have some kind of fund where they supported really promising African students who wanted to study economics and influence policy to promote growth in Africa. That would be a really cool thing if we could just have more subject matter experts in that area from the countries where those needs are greatest. Another area that I think many Christians are concerned about, including Christians in the Effective Altruism movement, is supporting church growth in unchurched areas. So especially in South and in East Asia, there are indigenous groups of Christians who are growing at very large numbers and very rapid rates. And there are things we can do even from the West to support the growth of these churches and of these Christians. There are all sorts of interesting cause areas we could talk about, grounded on moral uncertainty arguments. By that, I just mean, sometimes with importance, tractability, and neglectedness, we're actually not so sure how important something is. Like, for instance, with the prenatal health, how much of a moral loss is it if someone has a miscarriage after 1 week of pregnancy? That's something that people will debate about, and there is some moral uncertainty about whether you should value that miscarriage as completely 100% the loss of a full human life, or whether it's some fraction of that or nothing at all. But if you're uncertain at all and you assign any value to the loss of a certain life, then you might want to take that uncertainty into consideration and still address issues where you think it's more likely than not that it's not like the most important issue, but there are just so many beings at stake that we should do something about it. That's the case maybe with insects or with like the suffering of shrimp or other animals that we might think probably don't feel pain, but there are just so many of them that suffer in pretty clear ways. Maybe there's like a case for addressing insect welfare or like fish welfare or something like that. So all sorts of new cause areas could sort of spin off from that. So quick, a few discussion questions. Are you sympathetic to any of these novel cause areas? What cause areas would you add in? Should EA remain a Big Tent movement? EA has been traditionally about these 4 causes, and that provides a lot of coherency and cogency to the movement at times. But other times you might think, oh, this is really pulling at the seams, and these are some pretty wacky ideas. EA might lose some of its identity as being about effective development or about long-termism if it addresses too many topics and spreads itself too thin. So